Good afternoon. So I will be looking at the IPO chart and the flow chart. This is just to recap what you have done or to bring some clarity to what we have covered so far.
Okay, so we'll be looking at the control structure sequence and to see how you do an IPO chart as well as a flow chart for a sequence control structure. What do I mean by a sequence control structure? I mean that the steps or the instructions are given in sequence, step by step, one after the other. Like, for example, walking, you'd put one foot forward, then the next, and so forth. So the sequence of the program will be what will be done first, what will be done second, what will be done third, etc.
All right, so we're going to look at the first question. Accept the price of 5 items, find the subtotal, calculate at the GCT to be added using the rate 15% and determine the final cost after GCT is added. But before we go into the question, let's look on the input, the process, and the output. Now, your input is what the user will be inputting or what the computer is going to be getting from outside. And your processing is what the computer will be doing with what was entered. And then your output is what the user will get at the end of the processing. Okay, so we have looked on the question and we have identified the whole thing of the IPO, right? The processing and the output. Now we're going to analyze the question a little bit. Now, based on the question asked, you're going to look for what are the possible things that you will have under your input. It says accept price for 5 items. So from it says accept, it means that the user is going to be entering 5 items, and so you're going to have to put your variable names for 5 different prices. Now you cannot have price 1 to 5. You have to write individual variables that will capture the individual number. So whatever the person enters, you will have a variable to store each. And then it says calculate the GCT, and it told you that the GCT is 15%. Now by telling you this number, it's giving you a heads up. It's telling you that this number is constant. So no matter what is entered by the user, this GCT amount will always be. So we're going to put that under the rate as your variable. So your constant, sorry. So this will be your constant. Okay, so that will be your constant. So these are your variables and this will be your constant. Then we're going to move on to the next area. All right, so this area will look on the processing section. We have already put in our input, the 5 variables to accept the cost or the price of 5 items, and then we have the range. Now we're going to look at what specifically do we want the computer to do. So we move on where it says find subtotal. So it means that the computer will have to calculate subtotal, calculate the GCT. So we need to work out the GCT, determine final cost. So we need to give the computer the instruction on how to do these things. So we start off with the subtotal. How would you normally find subtotal? You normally find it by adding your prices together. So that's why we have subtotal. So we give a variable, a location that the total will be stored in. So subtotal is equal to price 1 plus price 2 plus price 3 plus price 4 plus price 5. So we'll add up what was entered by the user and put the answer into your subtotal. After the subtotal is calculated, we'll move to the next line, which is the GCT. Now the GCT is equal to what was found in the subtotal. You don't know what that is, but the computer will have the value stored in it. So we're just referring to the storage location so it knows that take whatever is in that location and calculate it. So it uses the subtotal, and this rate, how did this rate come about? Come about by the rate here. So instead of writing GCT is equal to subtotal times 0.15, we just use back the term rate because the value is already stored in rate. Then we move, let's remove that. Then we move into our final cost. How would you normally find final cost? It would be what you add up first plus the GCT. So we put subtotal plus GCT. So whatever was found in subtotal plus whatever was found in your GCT, we add them together, and the answer, the amount, is stored in final cost. So these are the variables, and after the equal sign is what we assign to those variables. All right, so that is your processing. Now we're going to move into the output section. So what you need to do is look at your question and see what is the output. So we have already accepted the 5 items, price of items. We have already found the subtotal. We already recognize that the GCT is a set price, and we worked out the GCT, and we have found out what is the final cost after GCT is added. And once we have done that, it's time to output. But what do we need to output? We will look for the word display. Once we find the word display, we know that that's the output. That's what should go in the output column. So we have output, and we use the literal. Print subtotal is. Now the word print subtotal is means that subtotal will appear on the screen. The letters, the string will appear on the screen. Then we have a comma, and then we have subtotal. Now this subtotal that we have here, this subtotal is what was found here. So the total that they found here, they're going to print it out. So by adding the variable name here, it means that the word subtotal will appear because it's in quotes, and then whatever is in the variable subtotal will be printed out. And then we have print GCT and print final cost, comma, it should have final underscore cost. I did not point out on the previous slide for processing, but let me point out right here, why do we have the underscore? We have the underscore because we wanted to have a space between the word final and cost. We cannot leave a space between it, because by putting a space between it, it makes it appear as though it's two different variables. And so we put the underscore so that it's joined to form one word. Okay, so let us continue. We have done our processes, we have done our outputs, we have done our inputs. So let us move forward. So let me clear. All right, so we're going to be working on our flow chart. Now, what is your flow chart? Your flow chart is a pictorial representation of an algorithm, of the process, of the set of instructions to solve the problem. So we have our question, and we have our input, processing, and our output. Now, the first thing that we're going to be doing is to have the title, cost of 5 items after GCT, and the first symbol that we use in our flow chart, this symbol is called the terminator. So this is your terminator. So in your terminator, you will have the word begin to show that you are about to start off the program. So we're going to take this IPO chart, and we are going to convert it into the flow chart, showing how the program will move from one stage to another. Okay, so let's continue. All right, so we have moved on and we have added. We looked in the input section, and we recognize that before we even start anything, we already know our rate. And because we already know our rate, we're going to put it in a processing box and assign the 15% to rate. As you can see, I use 0.15 instead of the 15% because it makes it easier when doing the calculation. So instead of writing 15%, I just divide 15 by 100 and get 0.15, and I will write that amount here. Then after, so we have our flow line from begin to the rate to show that's the next step. The next thing we want to do is enter what is in our input, and those are the prices. So we put it in the input output symbol, right? The parallelogram. After you put it in the parallelogram, you use the word input, and then you write all the variables that you would have added under the input column. All right, so we start begin, we put in our rate, which is our constant, and then we put in our first set of input using the input output symbol. All right, so I've done it on a full page now. So we have done the input and the output. So we have completed the input output. So we'll actually go to the processing. Now the processing, I decided to use one big processing box and do all that calculation. However, you could have decided to separate them. You could have decided to separate and separate these boxes. So you separate them and have your the flow line between them. That's up to you if you want to do that. But because of spacing, I decided to just put it in one processing box. And then I have, after I'm finished my processing, the next step would be output. So the symbol for output is my, as I said, input output box. It's the same for input. It's the same for the output. So I draw my input output and I add what was in my output column. Now, you don't have to put everything one time. You can do the same separation. All right, that I said, use individual input output box, but have your flow line in between, and then you go to your end. So this is how the program would flow. You know the rate. The person is going to input the 5 prices. The computer is then going to process what is the subtotal, the GCT, the final cost, and then print out on the screen subtotal, GCT amount, and final cost, and the figures that are associated with them, and then the program ends. All right, so we have completed the IPO chart for sequence, and we have looked on the flow chart and show how they flow. But now we're going to go to decision. Whenever you're writing a program, you may have to allow for the computer to answer certain questions, make certain decisions based on what the user enters. If it's greater than a certain amount and less than a certain, the computer will make a decision as to what to do. But first, we're going to be looking at when there's only one choice, so only one option is there, or 2 choices when there are 2 choices given. So you have one way of doing it, or you have two paths that you can take, one or the other. All right, so here is the IPO chart for if then, and your if then, let me put right here, is when you have one choice. Your if then is when you have one choice. Forgive my writing. So you have one choice. When you have one choice, you use the if then. So let us look at that. If the subtotal is greater than, so it's the same question, but I've added that section to it. If the subtotal is greater than 2,000, give a 25% discount. So what is there that I need to look at? The fact of the matter is, they said if the subtotal is, so it means that I must calculate subtotal first and then decide whether or not it's greater than the 2,000. If it is, then I do the discount. Otherwise, I don't do anything, right? So I work out my subtotal. So I have my input, I have my rate, but right here you realize that I put my discount rate in it as well, because this is known to me before I start the program. So I put it in as a constant as well. So it's just the same as the other one. I have my my subtotal, I add up my subtotal, then I do my if. If the subtotal is greater than 2,000, then, so we're questioning, we're asking a question. So the computer will check to see what value subtotal is and then make a decision based on that. So if it is greater than 2,000, we're going to say discount is equal to subtotal times the 20. And then after I'm finished, I'm going to say subtotal is equal to what was in subtotal before, what was up here, what was calculated here, minus the discount that I got here. So I'm going to use the subtotal here. Subtotal is equal to subtotal minus discount, and I end the if. Okay, so as we are going to move on to the flow chart, so I was just saying from the previous page that you work out your if, and then you move on to the GCT after you have calculated your discount, because normally GCT is given after a discount is given, right? Or sometimes it's even before. If it was before, I could have done it before and do the final cost or so. But this would be your chart with the discount, and which is 25%. Pardon me, in the earlier I'd said 20%. So the first thing I start with is my begin. Then I put my constant because I know them. Then I can move on to getting the inputs that were there. So get my inputs. Then I will get my subtotal is equal to price plus the price 1 plus price 2 plus price 3 plus price 4 and plus price 5. Once I get that subtotal, I'm then going to add up the information. I'm going to add after I add up the information, I'm going to make a decision. So my decision is either yes or no. So if it is greater than 2,000, then a discount is given. If it is not greater than this 2,000, then it will move on, right? Without doing anything before it goes to the connector. So if you look on yes, it does calculate the discount and minus the discount from subtotal. But when it says no, you realize that it does not do that. It actually moves on to look at the GCT and the final cost. So from the yes, it does the discount. From the no, it doesn't. Go straight to the GCT and calculate the GCT and calculate the final cost. Then it prints out all the things that are necessary for the output, and then you will have the terminator for the end. So that would be the flow chart for an if then. You will come up on a question. The computer will make a decision. If it is greater than the 2,000, then a discount is going to be calculated. And then it goes to the GCT and the final cost. If a discount, if it's not greater than 2,000, a discount will not be calculated, and then it will go straight to the GCT, work out the GCT, work out the final cost, then it prints out the information. All right. So now we're going to go to the if then else. This is when you have two options. All right, so let us write. This is when you have two choices or two options. So if it's not one, it must be the other. All right, two choices. So in this question, you recognize that just looking at the area that is shaded, it's if the subtotal is greater than 2,000, give 25% discount. Otherwise, give 5%. So if the person prices that they have entered, if it's add up to 1,500, then they'll get 5% discount. If it's more than the 2,000, like say 3,000, 5,000, then they get 25% discount. So this is where the program will calculate the subtotal and then decide between the 25, whether to give the 25% or the 5% discount. Again, we know those, so we know that they're constant, so we're going to include them in the input section. But please note that I put a 2 under this area, put a 2 under the discount rate 2 because it's different from the first discount rate. Go in, get the subtotal, then under the process get the subtotal, adding up all the prices. Then I start off. If subtotal greater than 2,000, then discount is equal to subtotal times the discount rate. Subtotal is equal to subtotal minus discount. So I've worked out, in case it's over 2,000, what will I do? I will use the discount rate, which is the 25%, by the subtotal, then minus that discount from the subtotal to get the new subtotal figure. Else, now the else is the otherwise. Else, discount is equal to subtotal times discount rate 2. And then I work out the new subtotal, and then I end the if. Then I can go to my GCT, work out my GCT, and after I work out the GCT, I will then go ahead and output all of what was there. All right? Let's look at the flow chart. It's very similar to what we have done before with the if then and sections of it, just like the sequence. So we have put in the begin, put in our constants, and we have inputted our price 1, price 2, price 3 all the way to price 5. Then we have worked out our subtotal. Once you have worked out the subtotal, you will then go into question whether or not the subtotal that was calculated, if it's greater than the 2,000. Now you realize that where my Y stands for yes, you'll realize that we did calculate the discount, and this is the first option immediately when you do your if statement. So if subtotal greater than 2,000, then discount is equal to subtotal times discount rate, subtotal equals subtotal minus discount. So you see that at the yes, but then at the no section, you see where we utilize the discount rate 2. So if it is greater than 2,000, we're going to utilize 25%. If it is less than, we're going to use the 5%. So you see that we have 2 lines coming from the decision, but this time it's not where one only have information. Both will have, because you have an else. So if it is one, do this, else do the other. So you will have some processing taking place on both sides. Then they're joined with the connector, and then you calculate your subtotal, calculate your fixed cost. Then you move into your print all, and then you end the program. And that would conclude what you would do with your IPO chart, starting from a sequence, breaking down your IPO into different structures or different areas, find out what would be needed. If you want to find out something, what would be necessary to be inputted, what do you need to process to get the answer that you want to output, and you just go through and complete. All right, so please go through their questions at the end that you can use as practice questions. There are 3 questions that are there, as well as you have another example that was done in class that you can go through. All right, wonderful.